Well, somebody knocked me off. I had to get back on. Here we go again. So let's see if you guys show back up. Hello. Who's there? Can you hear me now? Two. Okay, two of you. Yep, I'm back. Somebody knocked me off. Hey, 89. Okay, good. Hey there, Sarah. 89 and Jane. So, we're talking about Huberous self-reflection through the dynamic of Shakespeare's play The Tempest and through the 1956 sci-fi movie, which is an allegory of The Tempest, called Forbidden Planet. And this great culture called the Krell created this device that would manifest anything that you just had to think of it, and bingo would make it, right? And they didn't realize that they because they were so sophisticated, so cultured, so cured every ill culture, social, emotional, but they didn't realize that their id, their beast, was still back there. And in Shakespeare's play, The Tempest, Prosperos was the greatest magician, and he was a demigod, and his brother kind of stuck him on an island because he A might need him someday, but B didn't want him to whack everybody. So yes, adversity breeds men, prosperity breeds monsters, pretty much. And so that's kind of where we're at. We're at this really, yes, interesting spot of hubris. We think we're so hot stuff, but we're not, right? And as I gave a little thing about humanity, people, oh, we have to save Mother Earth from humanity, and I'd say, forget that. Humanity's like salt on a potato chip, kind of tasty but worthless. Happy joy, joy. Yep, yep. So I keep speaking of this thing called the alternative aesthetic. And the only way we can deal with these issues is through culture, art. And the alternative aesthetic. And that Shakespeare, the Greeks, the Bauhaus, all of these folks that Swedish artist Clem, all of them were trying to describe, to define, to create examples of an alternative aesthetic, a thing that when the human, the artist in the first person, can see it, that caveman who puts that picture on the wall, that's the alternative aesthetic. Otherwise, it's just advertising. It's just propaganda. Fake news, whatever you want to call it. Moving with intent. That's right. I mean, that is. I think you're right, Ride. Moving with intent is the gestalt, or the lightning understanding, or the foundation block, or one of the main foundation, the cornerstone of the alternative aesthetic. That intent, that awareness, that being awake, right? As I was telling someone that, I'm awake 80% of the time, but the other 20, I'm just a moron, So And that's what separates me from someone like Buddha, is that, the avatar is awake all the time. I'm just your sensei, Al Bob. I'm doing pretty good at 80%, but, you know, that's why I got a speeding ticket. So, um, what's the art project, Dragon? So, did you folks see? John and I both did a live chat. Oh, I guess 3 or 4 days ago, the day after uh, Donnie did his address to the Congress, and I wore the yellow wig first, and then John did, and we had some true moments of existential bliss, of creativity. I mean, I went back and watched it a few times, and it's pretty hilarious. So, and I, kind of started going back and looking at, I've done almost 400 of these shows, two a day, every day for the last 4 months. That'll turn up a lot of shows, and even the ones at the very beginning were kind of interesting. I mean, they were different than what I'm doing now because they were limited by the access to the internet I had. So they were shorter, and I would do a video of them and then put them up instead of just doing a live chat, which is so much easier for me. Oh, okay. Once you finish a dragon, if you're going to put it up on the internet, I'd love it if you put a link for me to see it on my the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail. And that's an interesting concept. The art as that anticipate and you know we're anticipating that we have this idea, we're getting it together, we're doing experiments on creating it. That anticipation of creation, and that anticipation is when we connect with love's co-creation, and that's when art in the first person of the savage is created. Oh, good. That's great. Again, I received a really sweet letter from you, and all who want to mail me things, Dragon, you too. Just to remind you, it's P.O. Box 1165, Vinton, Virginia 24179. But I got the sweetest letter. It was just so nice. And I love, and other people send me art and all kinds of beautiful things. I just love it. Just keep it coming. And any other little presents you want to send me is right. Yes. Yep. Forbidden Planet is the borrowing of the Tempest theme. And, it's not Shakespeare, and it's using the science fiction motif, which at its essence is the best because it takes it out of other genres and gives it a place where people can think about stuff. I mean, that's one of the best things about Star Trek. I mean, of all its, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, all of those different ones constantly try to Berman, the producer. Same with Babylon 5, dealt with so many interesting human situations, right? Theologic, emotional, psychological, romantic, every which way they talked about it, right? And that's one of the best things about science fiction. It gives a frame that you can put something on that is free of a prejudice. Yep, yep. Stargaze, yep. And, what's the one? Stargate. That was a good one, too. And there have been quite a few. Uh, okay, I like that, too, right? A lot tasteful of art depicts simple, stiff suffering with a bit of pleasure involved, and hopefully is that anticipation. Yep, Stargate. Yep. This is true. Well, that is the ghost in the machine. Yes, always go to your muse, your guides. That is that connection of love's co-creation. That's where the artist in the first person. You know, the savage. You know, and that's what I loved about Brave New World. The character of the savage really was the hot ticket. The illusion of time. That'll be an interesting piece. Dolly, for all his bluster, and MC Etcher, they both were trying to look at the illusion of time. And I think Van Gogh, anybody who was in their own point of view as the savage of the artist in the first person. Critique is a lost art in itself. And what I loved most about critique is when it was done in the salon. I studied with Lisette Model and Cartier-Bresson at the New School of Photography. And those guys, Cartier-Bresson got a Nobel Prize for a photograph he took during the Spanish-American War. Not Spanish-American War, the Spanish Civil War. It's the one where the soldier is getting shot and he's throwing the gun up. He captures that moment. And Cartier-Bresson and Lisette Model started Vogue magazine, and it was a photographer's, not just a fashion magazine. The fashion paid their bills, but they were a photographic thing. And Magnum, I think, was around before then, but it got its footing by what Lisette Model and Cartier-Bresson did. And both Magnum and Cartier-Bresson and Lisette Model and Cartier-Bresson taught photography at the New School, right? Well, the New School only paid their bills. I mean, they didn't, they didn't have they had a classroom there, and they would give lectures, but mostly every Friday and Thursday and Saturday, they would have salons, and they had a beautiful apartment right on Fifth Avenue, right where it hits Washington Square. It was like right on the corner. It's not right on the corner, but it's set back, and it was, maybe 15 stories high. It had an elevator. It wasn't a walk-up. And all of the apartments above the fourth floor of the other buildings that were around it had balconies. And you went out and you could have this amazing view in lots of different directions. And they had this beautiful apartment in that building, and that's where they had the salon. And in their class, they didn't teach you how to take the picture. They didn't teach you how to develop the chemicals and do the process. You were, to get into their class, you had to know how to do this already. I was already a newspaper. I was a journalist photographer. I showed a friend of mine, set up a interview. I brought my 10 best pictures that I thought were my best and showed it to her, and she goes, "Okay, you're in." And that's what we had to do every week from one of those evenings, is show up with 10 of our best photos. And, we'd first have a little nosh and a little libation, and then we would go around in the circle and we would show it, and we put them on the floor. They had this really nice light, almost a photonic light. I mean, it didn't show any shadows. It really was a great light. Right down on the floor, and you put your pictures down on the floor, and everyone would walk around and look at them, and they would make a comment, on each one, pick out the top three they liked, and we would talk about it, and we'd go around, and there were about, at any one of those nights, there was 10 to 20 people there with photos. Well, I'm more the guy who likes to take, my real specialty is taking pictures of people and not portraits. I'm kind of an Andy Leibovitz, Diana Arbus kind of person. I mean, I like to get to know the person, talk to them, make them feel comfortable, and then start taking pictures of them when they're comfortable with the idea of me taking pictures of them, right? And that we're sharing. We're doing just like we're doing, the griot and the adept, and we go back and forth, And so I like that. But I like architecture, and I like landscape, so I can take I'm about light. It's all about light to me, and so I can take pictures. I'm a good cinematographer too. If you take a look at, John has these movie lights, right? And he like points them right at you, so it's like wow, you're like blown away, right? Now, if you've got, film or something that's slow, the f-stop is slow, the ASS is slow. Yeah, you need some light. But the best kind of light is this kind of light. The light I got here is a bounced light, right? And then when I turn the brighter bounce light off, I have the colored bounced lights. So when it's reflected light cuts whatever kind of shadow you can have. And then it makes definition. See, this is kind of well lit. This is in definition. And then there's not quite a shadow, but there is a line that demarks things, right? And brings things out, like my little wrinkles up here, my little scars over there, my little beard right here. Yep, I got, and because I've been around and I've had amazing teachers, and I was smart enough in all those years that I was exposed to truly brilliant people, I shut the fuck up and listened, and I tried to follow by their example. Not to say, hey, I'm just as cool as you are. I'm the best. No, I said, I like this. And you're right. But taste is another word that we have to invent something better, because taste really represents prejudice, right? You know, and that's why critique is a lost art in itself, because why that worked in that circle of that class, we all respected Lisette and Cartier, like unbelievable. And there were people, Gary Winograd and other folks, Alan Tannenbaum, and a number of other people were in that circle with me, and they were like really well known, and we all respected each other, and that was just like our cadre. We were a cadre, right? And they were our sensei, and we did our best work every week to create those 10 pictures. And I was, I did a lot of other stuff. I wasn't like all these other people in that circle. what they were photographers. Period. That was it, right? And my first wife, Anna Ann McAdams, she's a great photographer, and she is like the Albert Einstein of the darkroom. Meaning, I built her a darkroom that was, like a laboratory. Had one of those thermometers in the water pipe so she could get that temperature exactly right. Me, when I mix chemicals, if it was in 5 or 10 degrees, one way or the other, it worked good enough for me. But not if you want a really perfect picture. Now, I was meaning part of my development of the picture was when I shot it, because I was all about the light. I used a process called the zone, meaning you kept your picture within a certain f-stop and speed, no matter what the light was and what that was. And so you had a constant that the other things, the chemical, how it's made and how it is or whatever it is. And I would make fresh chemicals every time I printed and every time I made negatives. I didn't make a big jug of it and leave it on the thing because you had to make it perfect if we did that. Whereas if you made just the amount of chemical that you needed to develop the negative or the prints, then those variables it was okay. And within the thing of my construct of shooting in a zone, and even with my this phone, I shoot it in that same zone way because I have an understanding of what my CCD is going to do, right? And I'm very aware and conscious of that. And it makes up for all the other limitations of like, it's a cheap camera, it's a this, it's a that. And so that word taste has to really be replaced by the word intent. I think our little cornerstone of our aesthetic is the intent. And so everything I do, I have this intent, right? And I trust what I'm doing, right? And I'm coming from that intent rather than some, preconceived taste, a style or whatever, right? And not that because taste and style, fascism is a taste and a style, genocide is a taste and a style. Well, only good Indian is a bad Indian. Taste and a style. Look at all those Western movies. Uh, you know, my phone is so limited. I can't use any real apps because it eats up my RAM to the point I can't use my phone. Right. So for me to do what I do here, I have to basically use no apps because my phone also, once I put 1 or 2 apps on it, it starts sucking down apps. Before I know it, I have like 2,000 apps on there and no RAM. And so, I really should be doing this off a laptop, but I don't have a laptop. So, you know, and that's another thing. Instead of my viewing my technology as a limitation, I use it as my aesthetic. So I don't really use apps at all because I kind of can't. I will. I've tried them out. I've looked at them. I haven't found any ones that I really think are really whoop-de-doo because they kind of get into almost a jingo or you know a limited materialistic point of view rather from a aesthetic point of view. Um, you know, in photography, I mean, I've lost, I don't know how many cell phones I have splattered all over the universe with millions of photos on, right? And that's why I have all of those book photos back from up till the year 2000. I printed things, and I got into a place where I printed. I used to do this process where I would do murals, photographic murals, and they had this stuff that was Agfa had this stuff that was like paint, and it was the same kind of photo stuff that's on photo paper, and you would, do it in, you put a tent up on a wall, and you splatter this stuff on the wall at night, and have a red light bulb, and then you exposed it, and I would have negatives, and I would have those toy projectors, that took D batteries, and I put slides in them or negatives in them and project them on to the stuff, and I'd make murals, right? And that was one of my art forms. And the NEA gave me a ton of money to do that kind of stuff. And my painting is kind of the same way because I learned how to paint as a scenery painter, right? And then I kind of hitchhiked across America, and I got a job doing, billboards. And they have billboards where you paste up the image, it comes in strips, and you kind of, stick them together. But back in the day, when I was a young man hitchhiking across America, and I fell into this job, they actually had billboards that you would paint, and you would do a square that had this thing. It was like almost like painting by numbers. And the guy I did it, he was an old master, and he knew trompe l'oeil, and he taught me trompe l'oeil. Yep, yep, yep. Bruce Lee, I heard him speak about that. No style, exactly. Just intent. Never tell an art professor art is to portray beauty. Yep. Art is to portray emotion. Yep. Have you ever had anyone take your camera and rip it out of your film? Yeah. Oh, not only that, I was in I was a newspaper photographer, right? And when I first started shooting, I had what is known as a frame camera, meaning the bellows. You put the curtain over your head, and you'd have the film on these 10 by 10 plates, and you'd put it in there and pull out the thing, and then hit the shutter, right? And that was great because you had a 10-inch by 10-inch negative, so you could shoot with depth of field, and everything would be in focus. And then I got into a large, like a 2 1/4, Hasselblad. So I was in the middle of a riot taking pictures, and I was really good at being invisible. I mean, I could just stand there, and this chaos would be around me, and people screaming and punching, and tear gas flying and bullets flying, and I would never, people would not see me taking the picture, except for this one time. It was a riot of gay people in New York, and this transvestite throttled me, grabbed my camera, and whipped it off of my head, and swung it around and smashed it into the head of a policeman. And and I just bought this thing. I saved up for like half a year to buy myself a Hasselblad and a couple of lenses, and it got destroyed on a riot policeman's helmet. So that was the closest to that. But other than that, no. Because I was always very respectful. Like I said, I would talk to people, I would get their confidence, I would be in and say, okay, I want to take some, I'm a photographer, and I'm going to take some photos of this situation and you, and how about it? Okay, okay. And they would get uncomfortable. I mean, they would get comfortable, and I would just keep shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting. And, I'd shoot 10 or 15 rolls, and I had a Nikon motor drive, and it was like a machine gun, and I had like a gigantic roll of film, not 36 pictures, but like 500 pictures in a roll. You know, it was a sports camera. A Post guy sold me this camera, and he was a sports photographer and had some really nice lenses, and you know, and I had a couple of Leicas because all of us, anybody who was an arty photographer, had a Leica, and my first wife, Donna Ann, she, that's how I met her. I met her on the subway, the J and the M train going over the Williamsburg Bridge to Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And it was winter, and I was coming home, from working in the theater, and I'd like worked all day, all night, getting ready. That last push before they start doing dress rehearsals, you got to get everything done. And if you only got X amount of time, you just don't, you just keep doing it, until you get it done. And I was kind of, I'd worked for 3 straight days and nights, and I was a little tired. And I'm sitting on this train with all there were Hispanic, black, and Hasidic guys. Basically no white people, because Hasidim are not white. They are so white, they go into albino. And the guys going out to Red Hook are blacker than black, and that's like where little Nigeria was. And the folks about 3 stops from me was like all very Hispanic. Now it's all nothing. I had a 17,000 square foot loft for $170. Anyway, so I'm on this train, and I'm you know chugging, and the first stop is Marcy Avenue. And in the subway, the lights are super bright. And when you're underground, outside that window, it's blacker than black. So those windows are like mirrors, right? So, you don't look at somebody straight at them. You look at the window and then look at them, right? It's like peekaboo. So I'm looking around, and I wow, there's this pretty attractive little cute thing, and she's taking pictures, and she's got a camera underneath. She's wearing a big naval pea coat, and so I see her like opening the jacket. I hear the click, and I can tell it's a freaking Leica, right? So she's taking pictures, and the train comes out of the darkness, and we're going over the Williamsburg Bridge, and it's a beautiful sunny day, and the water's sparkling. I mean, the sun's sparkling off the water, and we're looking up towards the Atlantic and the Statue of Liberty, and she's taking pictures of all that. Now you're not supposed to take pictures on the subway unless you have a permit, and so she's just taking them on the sly, and I see she drops her lens cap, right? I go over and pick it up, and it says Canon on it, right? But I hear the shutter of that camera, and I know it's a Leica. And us arty folks, we could afford a Canon body, right? A German Canon body. That'd be like $200 in the 60s and 70s. But a Leitz lens, those things were like, whoa. And they even then were like $400,000 or $500,000, right? But during World War II, the Germans gave the Japanese a bunch of Leicas, and the Japs knocked them off. And after, Canon put out their version of Leica. Their bodies sucked, but their lenses were pretty good. So, I would get, we'd all get lenses at Willoughby's, which was, this amazingly gigantic camera place that had every kind of everything photographic you could ever imagine. And they had these bins of lenses. It's, when you go to Walmart's and you get DVDs, they had bins like that with lenses, right? And if you know what you're looking for, you get a pretty nice lens for almost, like 20-30 bucks. So anyway, and those lenses for that Leica were made by Canon. They were screw mount, and the Japanese screw mount fitted the German body perfect, right? Us Japs can copy anything and almost make it better. And so I kind of pick up the lens, and I kind of slowly kind of worm my way, and she's by the door taking pictures, and I'm looking, over her shoulder at what she's taking a picture of, and she kind of looks up at me like this, and I said, I got this lens cap in my hand, and I say, you drop this. And I'm showing it towards her, and it says Canon on it. And she's got her camera under her coat. And I go, and you got a Leica, don't you? And that's like was the secret handshake. And she was like, "You're a photographer?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a photographer." She goes, "You live in Williamsburg?" I said, "Yep, live in Williamsburg." She goes, "Where do you live?" And we're going over the bridge, and I had this 17,000 square foot loft, right? And I was on the top floor, and on the corner, and it was like four buildings in one. And the corner was like what I lived in because it was only about 2,000 square feet, not 17,000, and I could insulate the windows and the cracks and heat it and not freeze to death. Where the other thing was like just like a gigantic aircraft hangar. And what I had done was my landlord, he rented this whole thing to me for nothing, like a couple $100, as long as I would take care of things for him, right? So I replaced a whole bunch of 8 foot fluorescents in one of his buildings, and I had about 300 of them. And I had his super bring them over to this building, bring them up in the elevator, and put them on the roof, right? And I wired them around the top of the building and then lit them up. And then I chased them, like bling, 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 bling. They would chase around. And it looked like someone had taken a Ferris wheel and turned it sideways on top of this building. And it was the highest building in that neck of the woods. And everything from 59th Street Bridge down to the Battery from on Manhattan on the FDR Drive, you could see this thing chasing, ding, 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 and inside the 17,000 square foot, because I was building all these discos, I had about 300 mirror. I bought this guy, his Sid made. I got him into building disco furniture and mirrored balls, and he just started knocking them out. So all the ones that didn't hit the spec, he sold them to me for a couple bucks a pop. So I had, and I went and got aircraft landing lights. They're called par lamps. And they shine a beam. Just a straight beam of light. Not just all over the place like this light bulb up here, but zing, very very pinpoint light. Pin spot is what they call it. And so that's what makes the mirrored ball so bright because it keeps the light just on the mirrored ball as it spins, all those little mirrors. So it looked like, a flying saucer. And that's what I was trying to get at. And I goes, right over there, that's where she goes, "You live in that building?" I said, "Yep." And she goes, I said, "Yep, that was me. That's my art." "Oh, you're an artist too?" "Yeah, just not a photographer, artist, yeah." Anyway, so we're talking about art and this and that, and she says, "My friend Gary Winograd." I said, "Oh, I know Gary." And she goes, "You do?" I said, "Yeah, I study at the New School." "You're at Lisette Motel's salon?" I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." So we're talking about all of this, and she's a very cute little thing, and really spunky, and I, you know, I get off at the first stop. So, but we get to the first stop, and before I can get her phone number, the door opens, and I got to get out. And I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, that's the last I'll see this girl," you know. And then the doors close, the train takes off, and I look right next to me, and there she is. She got off the train with me. I go, "Is this your stop?" She goes, "Yeah, I live nearby. I live nearby." And so, I go, "Well, that's cool." And so we walk down Broadway and we get to Roebling's, and I go down Roebling's, 4 streets, hang a right at DeKalb, go 2 streets, hang a left. There's Roberto Clemente. There's a little slide street called South 10th Street. That's where I am. That big loading platform. There's a doorbell. You hit that. Um, Elevator will come down. There's be this gigantic big black man. Ask him for me, Al, and he will take you where I am. And she goes, "Okay." So we walk down, and she goes the other way on Roebling's, and I go that way, and I go back home, and I go up to my loft, and I'm sitting and I have this table that's elevated So the big window that's facing all of like 54th Street to the Statue of Liberty, I look out and see it all, right? And that's my writing table. I got my little Olivetti typewriter, and I click, 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 and stacks of books everywhere. And I roll myself a doob. I'm having a nice little glass of wine, a little chunk of cheese. It's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 and I go over, and my front door is a fire door, big, heavy, kind of slides on a rail, and there's big, gigantic Kirby. He's about 6'8", weighs like 400 pounds. He's gigantic gorilla, and little Donna, you know, she comes, walks in. She's looking around, and it's really cold outside, but it's like, t-shirt warm. And I got like 90 gas heaters on my ceiling all over the place. And it's like being in Bermuda. And she takes off her coat and she's like looking around. She want a glass of wine? And Kirby kind of smiles at me, goes, she's cute, and turns around and goes back to the elevator. And she goes, he's a nice guy. I don't know too many guys like that, but he's very nice. He took a lot of energy to come and find you, and brought me around. I said, well, okay, that's cool. And then she's looking around. She goes, you got a kitchen. I said, yep, I got a kitchen. And then she goes, and she looks in. She goes, and you got a bathroom with a bathtub. And I mean, I had a bathtub. I mean, it was like a foot, 2, 3, 4 feet deep. It was on like lion feet, and you could, you know, stick 4 or 5 people in this. This is 19th century gigantic bathtub that I found off the street. And then she goes, "You have a washer?" I go, "Yep, I can do my own clothes here." And I would just hang them. I had ropes all over the place, and that's one reason why I would keep that place so toasty. Is that was my dryer. And then she goes, "You have a dark room?" I go, "Yeah." And she starts to weep, and I come over and console her. And she goes, I go, "What's wrong?" She says, "I live in a box and I have to shit in a bucket." She was living in a storage box. One of those, access anytime storage box, that 8 foot by 8 foot. That was what she lived in. And she had to crap in a bucket. And and I said, baby. After she says that, I said, you can stay here, not a problem. She moved in. That was it. From that day, for the next 8 years, we were nonstop. Yeah, I kind of, Dr. Barrio Gare, somebody left me a link of that boy. And if Janie got any more links of him, send them. Anybody got interesting links? Send them my way to the dude awake42 at Gmail. Yeah, that's a nice camera. I had one of those. The other thing I had that I really loved, I had a dial, a half frame camera, meaning it took a 35 millimeter and took half a picture on either side, and it was really great because I would take a picture and make sure I put another picture on the other side of that 35 millimeters square that went together, and then I would print it, and so there would be these two images that kind of went together, and where that line was, they could kind of blur in if I moved it one way or the other. I had a lot of strange cameras. Madame Olga Kluver, she had some wicked ass, weird ass cameras. Some of them I had to make the film myself, you know, because they were from the 1890s. And you think you have a hard time, you know, I got so much videotape that, I have beta that I can't play. I have 3/4 inch I can't play. I got a ton of, and you just have to accept that those images are never going to be seen. Are we back? I got knocked off again. We here? Oh, I'm more than a good Samaritan, Jane. If you're, she was so cute. And we had this spark. We had 8, we got married.